on the bone marrow suppressing platelet formation. In our experience, and certainly it's supported by medical evidence and science in the scientific journals, those people that are most reactive to environmental toxins are those people with a low total cholesterol, poor protein status and a low triglyceride level. What we're suggesting is that the rise in obesity and disease epidemic has been created by this healthy eating advice and the phony war on cholesterol and dietary fat. We've been told big fat lies, and we need to find a strategy to follow that's not only give us our perfect weight, but it's actually going to give us health, lifelong health. And that's what we're here for. That's what we're here to tell you about. Where did we get this idea that calories in to exceed calories out results in weight gain? A calorie is a calorie, but how that calorie is burnt is dependent on the position of certain hormones at that given time, in particular insulin. So a calorie is not a calorie. It depends on how you're going to burn that calorie. So what was the typical hunter-gatherer diet? What were these indigenous healthy individuals that weren't concerned about weight gain or weight loss? What were they eating? Well, this is typical of a hunter-gatherer diet. 65% of the calories came from traditional fats. 15% came from carbohydrates and 20% on average came from proteins. Now, generally when we do diet diaries and we look at people's nutritional intake, we notice that their protein intake may vary between 16% to 33%. So that variation is not a great deal. So the two variables are fat and carbohydrate. So when people deliberately go on a low-fat diet, which is what's recommended as being a healthy diet, if you deliberately go on a low-fat diet, you will also avoid the highest quality proteins. You will go out of your way to limit the consumption of nature's foods such as eggs, meats, cultured dairy foods, the very foods that have nourished mankind since their inception. Our genes haven't changed, but our nutrition and the advice that we've been given has fundamentally gone wrong. It's fundamentally gone wrong. Well, lifestyle and health, there's an indisputable link, an absolute indisputable link. And what I've recognised by doing chemistry after chemistry and consulting with patients day after day, there are three fundamental, foundational problems that are occurring. One, we're seeing glycemic stress, in other words, blood sugar problems, metabolic problems, hormonal problems. We're seeing chronic inflammation, and we're seeing oxidative stress. And they're fueled by the wrong nutrition. So the answer to this is nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. How do we know we're correct? Well, if we look at the statistics, back at the turn of the century in 1900, heart disease accounted for 8% of total deaths. 8%. By 1985, heart disease had jumped up and it accounted for 36.9%. And by 1995, it had jumped up to 43% of total deaths. And today in our society, it's 1 in 2. That's the incidence of some cardiovascular disease or complication. If you look at cancer, in the 1900s, it accounted for 3.7% of total deaths. By 1985, cancer had jumped to 22%. By 1995, another 10 years, it had jumped to 33%. And today in our society, the leading cause of death in children is cancer. Something's going wrong. What are we actually eating? Well, if you have a look here, cereals and cereal products made up the bulk of our nutrition. Were our ancestors doing this? Do we have the genetics to be able to do this in such a short period of time? And the type of nutrition or the type of cereals that we're seeing consumed are processed cereals. And we've managed many athletes that are following this concept of eating processed cereals for energy, and within time their health declines. They get some autoimmune disease or they develop chronic infections or they develop joint problems and repair problems. So this is the food pyramid that's been recommended to us. This is healthy eating advice. It's what we call politically correct nutrition, and it's exactly the same way that we fatten livestock. How do we fatten livestock? That's it. Stick them in a pen and give them grains. If they're free roaming and eat foods that they're designed to eat, they become sturdy and strong. So when we follow this concept, we see an enormous rise in society of obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, arthritis, infertility, birth defects, reproductive harm. This is big dollars. Some people may think that they're having a nice healthy pasta. Well, 200 grams of pasta is equivalent to 150 grams of sugar, because carbohydrate is basically broken down to glucose. That's the end result of consuming carbohydrate. So obviously we have good carbohydrates and we have bad carbohydrates. Bad ones are processed ones, those that are devoid of nutrients. And I'm afraid pasta fits that bill perfectly. So for all those pasta lovers. So what happens when you consume these sorts of carbohydrates? The first thing that happens, you'll get an enormous spike in your blood glucose. So as glucose goes up, insulin goes up to clear the blood of that glucose. And what's not burnt is stored as fat. When insulin's elevated, when it's presented with calories, it's going to be stored as fat. And we know those people that have attempted to lose weight and they've known that weight comes straight back on with a vengeance. Because see, you're designed to gain weight and you're designed to keep it on. It's a safety mechanisms between feast and famine. And if you happen to have this gene, and some people referred it to as the dinosaur gene, if you happen to have that gene, you're a winner. 1,000,000 years ago. Is this familiar? We're going to follow the politically correct advice. And that's exactly what happens. You follow the food pyramid and you'll do exactly what our livestock does. So what's the short-term consequences of what we call glycemic stress? Well, we all know it. Mood swings. Who has a mood swing? We all do. Who gets ravenously hungry if they miss a meal and they try to compensate and they can't stop foraging? In other words, they eat from dawn till dusk. Matter of fact, some dietary advice says eat 6 small meals a day. Has anyone done that? Is this, or 7 or 8? The outcome of that is weight gain. Because what we're concerned about is the metabolic consequences. We're looking at what is it and what do our hormones and where is that hormone sitting at any given time? Well, when we look at 3 major food groups, that's carbohydrates, protein and fats, and see what is the effect of insulin when you consume only a certain food group. Well, if we have a look at fat, you don't need insulin to utilise fat for energy. And we all know there's essential fatty acids and fats are broken down to be used for energy. It's very efficient. Only takes 5 enzymes to derive something like 148 molecules of ATP. Bit of science there for you. So it's very energy efficient. So we use fat for energy, we use it for structure, and we also use it for the construction of hormones. There's a whole host of absolutely essential things that are required from consuming fat. When you consume protein, there's a slight insulin response to protein. But when you consume carbohydrate, the same amount in calories, look at the response that the insulin has. So, if I eat fat, won't I be fat? No. Because what happens? Your insulin level doesn't get affected. But what happens if you double dip? In other words, if you have the sugar plus the fat, of course you're going to gain weight because your insulin level is going to go up. Everyone would have heard of high glycemic foods, low glycemic foods. Well, it's more to it than that. It's not just about glycemic index. Firstly, the charts aren't 100% accurate, but there's a concept there which is absolutely correct. So the high glycemic foods are things like breads and pastries, pasta, white rice, processed breakfast cereals, fruit juices, soft drinks, We're all culprit to this. We wake up in the morning, have cereal, skim milk, glass of orange juice. What's going to happen to our blood glucose? Skyrocket. What happens to our insulin? Skyrocket. So the key to a healthy diet, what we're suggesting, and it's based on chemistry markers, is the right balance, the right amounts, and the right kinds of the macronutrients called carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Another major thing's occurred in our society, besides the consumption, the overconsumption of refined carbohydrates, is the choice of the wrong fats. So if we're going to look at bad fats, what do we classify as bad fats? There's good fats, there's bad fats, there's good carbohydrates, bad carbohydrates, good calories, bad calories. We've discussed a sampling of everything here this evening, but what do we class as bad fats? Well, they're those fats that are industrially processed. They're those man-made fats, those new-fandangled fats. They're what we call trans fatty acids. And in the science today, we accept that trans fats can underpin cancer, heart disease, immune system problems, growth development problems, diabetes, chronic degenerative disease overall. In other words, they're the wrong type of fats. They're the hydrogenated fats. They're the processed, chemically synthesized fats. So this is an example of industrial vegetable oil processing. The problem with having oils processed in this manner is they get oxidized, they get damaged. Those fragile oils end up becoming part of our own cell membranes. So our membranes don't function. Nutrition fails. So if we were going to propose a healthy fat pyramid, what would it look like? Traditional fats making the mainstay, keeping oils and fats that are very easily damaged to a minimum. So we use traditional fats as butter, fat found in our grass-fed meats and free-range chickens, etc. How do we know this is correct? Because blood test after blood test confirms the improvement in patients' well-beings and confirms and validates what we're saying. Blood test after blood test. And those people that fail to follow the advice fail to get better. What happens when you eat those foods that are classified as junk food? Well, we end up with chronic nutrient deficiencies. Chronic nutrient deficiencies. Foods, minerals like magnesium and zinc, and manganese and selenium, all your essential vitamins. But more important, you also miss out on protein, good quality protein. You miss out on those essential fats. So you end up with chronic nutrient deficiencies, and that leads to chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, glycemic stress, and it eventually results in chronic degenerative disease. So you can start to see that weight gain is simply a reflection of an underlying health concern. And if we focus our attention on the underlying, the fundamental reasons, then you'll achieve your perfect weight. So true health is actually an everyday imperative. And what we've given you is the knowledge, we've given you the awareness. That awareness is going to allow you to avoid these environmental toxins and to avoid the very foods that got you unwell, if that's your concern. And we're going to give you an action strategy. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thanks for sitting in on our recent seminar. You now have the facts based on the science for healthy eating, cholesterol, detox, exercise and weight loss. Of course, achieving these outcomes is more than just knowing the facts. You have to take action. And that's where we can help. In another segment of this DVD, I'll take you on a tour of the Nutrition Diagnostics Centre. I'll introduce you to the keys to perfect weight and body chemistry for lifelong health. You'll see how effortlessly you will achieve your perfect weight and how to stay there naturally. You'll see how we tailor a program uniquely for you, based on your body chemistries, and how we tailor your healthy body, healthy eating program. And you'll get to see the world's most advanced sauna